Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl. This is going to be episode 183 of my poker vlog. For this one, I play another 2-5 session at Sarasota, Florida, the One Eye Jacks Poker Club. Before I get into the hands, I have two quick announcements. One was, I went really deep in a tournament. One bullet and a dream, one deep run, got 6th place and a $200 buy-in. Guess I'm a tournament pro from now on. I say this because if you have interest in me going over the hands from this deep run, please like the video. If I get over 1,000 likes, I'll probably make a video about the tournament. The only thing with that is there is no live footage. It's all just recap. They don't let you film at the Hard Rock during a tournament. Absolutely not. So let me know if you have any interest in that. Otherwise, my Club GG has now a $100,000 bad beat jackpot. It's already been hit once with a ton of table share. If you have any interest in battling for that, you can message me on Instagram or Telegram. Additionally, I will be streaming a table this Monday. So if you have any interest in playing with me on stream, please comment below or message me on Telegram or Instagram, and I'm happy to get you set up for that. Otherwise, let's roll the tape.
But the Ace of Hearts means I have plenty of 2 barrels if a heart comes. 5, Ace, Heart. Maybe a King is a 2 barrel. I don't know. Guess we'll reevaluate once we get there. Queen. Last time I bet big on turn, I had an overpair, and this time, showing that gets me some credibility. So we win one. Today we are straight to the 2-5 game, and we sit down with an $800 buy-in before we get to the first hand of note. I'm in the low jack with pocket 10s. When it folds to me, I make it $20. Only the big blind decides to call, so we end up going heads up to a flop, which comes Queen, Queen, 9, Rainbow. Seems like a board my opponent's going to miss an awful lot of the time, so I think 10s is a pretty standard C bet. Some Ace X may call this bet, some weaker pocket pairs, maybe King Jack and Jack 9 and 8 10, even though we block it a little bit. So I bet $20. The big blind decides to call, so we're heads up to a turn card, which is the 9 of spades. When my opponent checks to me, I think I'm going to put out a second barrel here and then give up river. I can still get value from King X, Jack 10, 10 8. All the weaker pocket pairs are probably going to fold as their counterfeit, but maybe some single ace highs might call a second bet.
They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time.
I bet $50, and as my opponent called, I just realized that if my opponent has just a random queen, I'm actually drawing dead, so maybe it's a pretty bad bet. When the river is the 6 of diamonds, I'm never putting any more money in this pot. My opponent checks to me, and I check it back. Okay. And my opponent takes a second or two before showing Queen Jack. The nuts will win the pot on this one. Following that, I'm in early position with Jack 10 of hearts. I raise to $20. The hijack decides to call before the cutoff raises to 110.
There it is.
Now, this is a hand that I think you could defend against a 3-bet with. Has good properties to crack aces and kings, and also is doing pretty well against ace king and ace queen specifically. But this time, I think I'm just going to let this one go. Kind of a nothing hand, but sometimes you just have to respect your opponent's 3-bets, especially when they're not 3-betting all too often. On the next interesting hand, I have ace king of diamonds in the +2 position. I make it $20. The button, a middle position player, and the big blind decide to call, so we end up going 4 ways to a flop, which comes Jack 3 deuce with 2 diamonds. Awesome to flop the nut flush draw. I think this is a board where even into multiple people, they're going to miss some of the time and just fold. So we're definitely going to c-bet this one. 2 overs, flush draw, $45 seems reasonable. What's kind of shocking is the middle position player calls, then the button calls, then the big blind calls. Alright, well, we're going 4 ways to a turn card. A diamond would be fantastic, but we get the 10 of spades instead. When it checks to me a second time, I could easily double barrel here. I have a good candidate double barrel here. Minimal showdown value, 13 outs to basically a nutted hand. Even an ace or a king on the river should be a winner, at least at some frequency. But I do think into 3 people, at least one of them could realistically have Jack 10 specifically here. And if they turn 2 pair, they're absolutely never folding to a second barrel. They might even raise me. And I think this hand functions better as not wanting to face a whole lot of pressure and definitely wanting to realize its equity. so I decide to check the turn. Middle position player checks, and then the button bets 80. Very small in relation to the size of the pot, especially when 4 players had to put in 45 on the flop, so we're not ever folding here, we're never really raising. Calling is what I think is the best option, hoping to realize, and we do. The turn is the 6 of diamonds. We have the actual nuts.
Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you believe?
Yeah.
Can we just...
No.
Even better, the 6 is not higher than a jack, so if my opponent had top pair, he retains top pair. And we're not going to give the chance for a top pair to check back river. We want to put some money in the middle, so I just lead out into him for $250. I would do this as a bluff if I had just the ace of diamonds at some frequency, so I do believe I have some donk lead river bluffs. So that means I should be able to bet relatively big here. If I had bluffs, I'd be trying to get my opponent to fold. So when I have value, we want to go somewhat close to a pot size bet here. I lead for $250. My opponent tanks for what feels like forever. Over a minute, gathers the chips, grabs his cards, goes back and forth, but then eventually decides to fold. No additional money when we make the nuts, but we will take the pot nonetheless. Next interesting hand. I'm in the +2 position again with 10-9 of spades. When I raise this one up to $20, the button and the big blind decide to call. So we end up going 3 ways to a flop of 10-9-3 with 2 hearts. 2 pair is wonderful. We like flopping 2 pair, and it's also somewhat disguised as from betting this early of position, I'm unlikely to have 10s and 9s and 10-9 all that often. Interestingly enough, the big blind leads for 20.
That doesn't make sense.
And these small leads are often draws, and because it's 10-9-3 2 hearts, there are a million draws out there of which I block none of them. Hearts, queen jack, 8-7, jack 8, so many straight draw flush draws to get value from. We are raising right now to $60. Not really expecting this raise to get folds, I'm really just going to build the pot with some value. The big blind tags along, he's not a quitter, and so we are heads up to a turn card, which is the 6 of diamonds. Well, on the danger scale, that's like a 3 out of 10, because 7-8 definitely gets there, but everything else misses. Hearts, over straight draws. So we're not going to slow down on this one. We bet $110. Pretty straightforward hand, pure value, pure protection. My opponent makes the call. Can we get a safe river card? This time we get another 3 to 4 out of 10 on the safe scale. It's the 3 of clubs. I say that because there's a small chance my opponent has jacks and that gets there. But besides that, all the draws miss. When my opponent checks to me, I decide to check this one back. Not because I think my hand's not good at all. It's really just the fact that I believe my opponent whiffed and is just never paying me off anyway. So I check because having position, he has to show his hand first and he just shakes his head. I kind of point to him. He says, oh, I missed ace high. Those words are all I need to know. That's an ace high flush draw all the way. So we'll show now. Top 2 pair was able to fade the hearts on this one. With 1 limp, I'm on the button with Queen 8 of clubs. We're going to raise this one up because it's the suited queen versing 1 limp. Taking down the dead money is fine. If not, we play in position with a playable hand. Not a good hand, but playable. The limper decides to call, so we're heads up to a flop of Jack 10-8 rainbow with 1 club. So we have a gutter, we have a pair, we have a backdoor flush draw. Honestly, pretty good for Queen 8. My opponent checks to me. I'm just going to bet this one. My opponent's a limp caller, and I have a pair, so kind of just some street poker. I'm just going to bet $25 in position. My opponent makes the call. Less than ideal. Would love to see a club on this turn card, but it is the 3 of diamonds. When my opponent checks to me, again, this just seems like the spot to lay on the pressure. My opponent might fold a 10 to a second barrel. Maybe he has a random ace-9 that's just going to pay me and be behind. Maybe he has ace-x and he just has an overcard, and we don't want that to see a river for free. So $65 will be the bet. This time my opponent gathers the chips really quickly, and he plays with them for a while. So now I'm thinking this bet was terrible, and I'm about to get snapped off by a jack. But he folds. So we take one down as kind of a mergy semi-bluff. Next hand of note. We have pocket aces. The greatest hand to see at an action-y table. where everyone's really deep. It starts off even better. We're in the small blind, but the under the gun player starts it off with a $20 raise. Then the +1 player decides to call. Okay, we're getting more money in there. A middle position player calls. Now we got 60 in the middle. Everyone else folds to me. 60 will not be enough. We decide on a sizing of 135. We're out of position, so we're going to size up a little bit. Would be awesome if the under the gun player just ripped because he's got like $600 in his stack. Seems like we've set him up pretty good for that, but he chooses to just call. Not my favorite outcome because I think everyone else is a little more incentivized to call, but the other two players fold, so that's great for me. Heads up, out of position with aces, and we get pretty much one of the safest flops you can ever get. 8-3-3. Suppose the only way it's safer if it would be 8-8-3 because less combinations of pocket eights, and that'd be a little bit better, but we're not going to complain. We don't have any spades in our hands, so we're going to bet small here. Spade draws pay us. All 9s, 10s plus, maybe some random overs aren't going to give up to a slight down bet. So I bet $125. Setting up for like a turn jam as my opponent would only have like 400 in his stack if he decides to call. But he chooses to fold. And we take one down. Aces do not get cracked on this hand. Happy for that. This may be the day of 10-9 suited, because now we have 10-9 of hearts in the small blind. Under the gun limps, the +1 raises to $25. Hijack calls. I'm going to call in the small blind because 10-9 suited is pretty good multi-way. And the under the gun player calls as well, so we're going 4 ways to a flop, which comes 10-3 deuce with 2 diamonds. Well, we don't have the betting lead, and I'm not really going to donk lead on this one. I do think it's a good candidate to check raise, as my opponent might c-bet with any ace-x holdings, and we could just get those to fold to a check raise at a decent enough clip. So I check inflow. Unfortunately for me, this one checks through. Not my favorite outcome. Turn is the queen of hearts. Kind of a bad one. Higher than a 10. Does connect to my opponent's ranges, but I think check calling is the worst option here. If we check, they bet, and we call. We haven't really gained any information. We don't really know what's going to happen on the river. If we choose that line, we're kind of just calling and hoping our opponent checks back and we're somehow good. So we're not going to choose that one. We're going to lead out here ourselves. $45 will be the bet. I think I can still get called by like King Jack, Jack 9, maybe some ace high and some pocket pairs that don't want to give up just yet. Well, the under the gun player raises to 145.
Fuck! Seriously?
Then it folds back to me. Here's where I started thinking about dynamics. Is this opponent just tilting? He lost a big pot right before the aces hand, and I thought we were going to get in on that one. Maybe he's just taking a stand against me on this one. I don't know. Part of me wanted to just rip this in and be correct, because what could he really be raising here with? Are you going to raise with a single queen? Seems unlikely. I have a 10, so it's unlikely he has queen 10. Is he saying he has a set? I don't know. Feels like he's just raising with a flush draw and doesn't have it, but in the end I decided that this would just be too risky to do it out of position and really not know where I'm at the river, so I let this one go. We live to fight another day. Maybe it's not the day of 10-9 suited, but we do have ace 10 of clubs. That one seems pretty good. With 3 limps, we're on the button. We're going to size up pretty big here. We make it $40. 2 of the limpers decide to call, so we're going to be going 3 ways to a flop, which comes 7-4-3-2 clubs. I'm pretty much always going to bet my ace-high flush draws on boards like this. Hopefully the 40 pre priced my opponents out of hands lower than 7. So if we did that, then they have misses. They have like Jack 10 suited, King X. I mean, it's a 2-5 live game. These guys could have like 8-9 offsuit and weird stuff like that limp and then call a raise. But 2 overs and a flush draw is going to be good enough to bet, and we're going to bet relatively big here since we just have ace high and would love to just get folds right away. I bet $80, and we get 2 quick folds. So that one is a fun little chip up. Pretty easy, pretty simple. We like it. After that, with 1 limp, I'm in the cutoff. I look down at ace jack offsuit, and I raise it to $25. On this one, only the limper calls, so I'm going heads up to a flop of ace 9 deuce rainbow. When my opponent checks to me, I think I have just this board completely locked up. I'm versing an opponent who is very wide, very much action, so I think that if I check it here, he actually will fire turn a large portion of the time as a bluff, and we can happily bluff catch with this hand. So I check it back. The turn is the 5 of diamonds. Unfortunately for me, my opponent checks to me a second time. Well, we're not going to let it go through twice without putting in some money, so I bet small, $25. My opponent very quickly folds, but we win the pot. And on the next hand of note, We have pocket kings in the low jack. There's an undergun limp. I raise to $25. The button and the limper calls, so we end up going 3 ways to a flop, which comes 776 rainbow. Kind of a middling connecting board. Kings definitely does not have the range advantage on this board, so when it checks to me, I think it's perfectly reasonable to check here and reevaluate. So I bet $40. The button decides to call, so we go heads up to a turn card, which is the 5 of hearts. Not my favorite. 8-9 is one of the hands I was hoping my opponent could have, and that beats us pretty handily now. I check it to my opponent, and my opponent does not check. He bets $60. Not my favorite development. A board that's very much heavily in his favor. He's betting into a pre-flop aggressor and flop aggressor. Seems kind of strong to me, but for $60, I'm not folding kings. If a king or a 7 comes, I win with a full house, most likely. But when I call, we get another pretty bad river card in the 6 of diamonds. Ugh, I was hoping my opponent would have just a single 6 at some frequency. So when he'd have 8-9 at some frequency. All the hands I was hoping he'd have when I bet flop all beat me now. I checked to my opponent, and he has about $200 in his stack. If he jams, it's going to be like the grossest thing ever, as I'm probably just going to have to call off. But he checks it back, and then shows 8-5 of spades. Takes me a second to realize that's not a straight or a full house, and I can beat that one with a pair of kings. So quite an interesting one, quite a dicey run out. I'm glad my opponent didn't put me in a difficult decision on this river. Maybe he will in the next one. Next interesting hand. I'm in the +2 spot. I've got pocket 10s. I make it $20. The cutoff decides to call. Player from the last hand. So we end up going heads up to a flop, which comes 5-3-4 with 2 hearts. Because this is a board that's never really going to connect to me, and my opponent can literally have anything as wide as 8-5 suited, we're not really going to bet into him on this one. We're going to try to take a free card and reevaluate. So I check. This time I'm also out of position. My opponent decides to check it back. Pretty happy to see the turn card, which is the deuce of hearts. Now I think I can bet here because I have ace-x a lot of the time. I would bet ace-x, and because my opponent has shown that he'll play like very wide range and will just fold to small bets when he misses, I bet $20, just trying to rep any ace-x that might check flop and then just have the wheel right now. But my opponent makes the call. Turn is the 8 of clubs. I beat some hands. I now lose to 5-8 if my opponent would play that 2 times in a row. Not sure, but I check, hoping to see a free river like I did the last time and win. But this time my opponent bets $20. So now I'm getting an insane price to call. And in my mind at this point, because there's 3 hearts out there, I have the 10 of hearts, I block a flush draw. My opponent either has a 6 or nothing. I don't think 2 pair can bet like this. I think a made flush on the turn would have raised. And I think single pairs just check it back as well. So after going back and forth with my amazing price, I decided to make the call. My opponent shows ace-queen, and I think that I just picked off an ace-high bluff and have the winner confidently show pocket 10s and then realize that I lose to the wheel.
What, you think that's funny?
So kind of a funny hand where paid my opponent money and didn't even realize that I was a loser. So that was fun. Which brings us to a final hand of note. With 5 limps, I have queen 6 of spades in the big blind. You could raise this. Raising would be fine. I think 35-40, picking up some dead money seems reasonable, but we kind of don't have a very good image after we thought we had the best hand and did not. So we're just going to check this one back. Flop is queen 9-8 rainbow with 1 spade. We have top pair. Now we're going to bet $15. Seems reasonable to value bet your top pairs for small into multi-way pots. So $15, we clear out 1, 2, 3 hands. 2 players decide to call to 15. When 2 players call, I'm feeling a lot less confident about a top pair with no kicker. But the turn is the 8 of diamonds. Although we lose to a random 8, we now have a little bit less of kicker problems. But I'm going to check out of position versus 2 players, and the cutoff checks, and then the button bets 30. Well, I have top pair. I guess I call. Seems like the right move in this point. Hopefully my opponent just has a draw or a 9 or a weak queen that we're just chopping with, because he just limped the button. How strong can his hand really be? When I call, we end up going heads up to river card, which is the 7 of hearts. I check it to my opponent, and he checks it back. I announce queen, and he says a queen is good. So we have a nice little small little rebate pot right at the end before we start to rack up our chips and head out We are in this game for $800, out of the game for $14.19. We only play all these hands in 2 hours because the game took a little longer to start than usual. So across 2 hours, that equated to $309 an hour, or 61 big blinds an hour.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with how I played today. I don't always get to say that. I often have a ton of mistakes every session. Luckily for me, today, the hands that I lost were the smaller pots. Notably, the pocket tens hand was one of the smaller hands of the entire day. Got some bluffs through. Aces did not get cracked. That's always going to be helpful. And today was just a good, straightforward day. So if you made all the way to this point, thank you. I appreciate it. And again, if you want to see a recap of the tournament, please like the video so I know that enough people are interested. And I will see you on the next one.